Islam. Just that word alone evokes fear and suspicion amongst many people. I don't believe what the media tells us is always true. So recently, I asked Haisam Farache, otherwise known as the Surfing Sheikh, to join me for a surf and to sit down and have a discussion about Islam. What I found was a highly intelligent man who was only more than happy to answer my questions. Hey guys, welcome today. I'm here with Haisam Farache, otherwise known as the Surfing Sheikh, and we've just had a pretty cool surf then. And thanks so much for joining me today. The reason I wanted to have you come out, have a surf with me, and also have a conversation, I wanted to cover two things. Firstly, I wanted to talk about Islam. Being a white Anglo-Saxon Aussie, I'm sort of confused with a lot of things that gets portrayed potentially in the media. And to be honest, there was quite a few people over the last month or so that I told that I was hoping to meet up with you. And what surprised me was, and I won't lie, I reckon 80%, 90% of people are like, oh, be careful. And I'm like, but why? You know, and so that's why I wanted to meet with you, because I guess we have something in common with the ocean.
Yeah.
And for you to explain to me, like, what is Islam to you?
Well, that's a good question, and I think it will take a long time to answer it. For me, it's a spiritual way of life. It's a way of life where I can understand myself as a human being, why I'm on this earth and what I'm supposed to do while I'm here, and also to understand the universe around me, the ecosystems that are close to me, and the cosmos that's around me, and also to understand my Creator.
Okay.
So it gives me that perspective and that understanding. Islam is not only a philosophy about how to live life and what life's about, but there's also practical aspects to it about, you know, the beneficial things for a person to do. For example, like fasting. Like 20 years ago, when we said we used to fast in Ramadan, people used to freak out. Now people do it as a health thing, you know, the intermittent fasting.
Yeah.
So we've been doing it for, you know, millennia, long time. So there's science involved in it as well, and it's pretty much a very all-encompassing sort of way of life. And for me personally, I went on a journey when I was young, looking for the truth, and I found it in Islam.
What's your background? Like, where is your family originally from?
I'm born and raised here in Australia.
Yep.
My father and mother are from Lebanon.
Okay, and they're Muslim as well?
Yes, everyone's Muslim in my family.
And were you brought up with Islam? Like, was it sort of taught to you from when you were a young kid?
Not really. I mean, my parents were kind of cultural Muslims because they just grew up in that area, and that's how it was.
Yep.
But we used to go to school on Saturdays, and they used to teach us a bit about Islam. I used to run away because I always wanted to play footy on a Saturday.
Yeah, okay.
But, you know, they used to teach us a little bit about our faith and stuff, but it wasn't so prominent, you know. But I just, like I said, I went on my own journey when I was about 18. I went to the United States and I went to university, and I took a course on Islam there, and I actually studied a lot of different faiths. So I went to a Christian school, so I studied Christianity. I had some Jewish friends.
Yep.
We lived up the road actually from a synagogue. So
okay.
I had plenty of Jewish friends and studied that, and Aboriginal culture as well, and the Native American culture when I was in the United States, and Taoism and Buddhism. I studied a lot of things.
Wow.
And then in the end, it was the thing I was kind of running away from, so to speak, Islam, and I found the truth there, and I was kind of forced to accept it more than anything else.
Why did you choose to go to America to study it? I mean, for me, I would have thought you'd go to the Middle East.
Oh no, I went to just study. I was actually studying medicine.
Okay.
In the United States, and one of the really good thing about the American university system is the first 2 years you have to do all these general subjects, and so I had to do some history subjects, and I thought I'll just do Islam, you know, and it's something that, you know, it's part of my background.
Yeah.
And I wasn't practicing at the time, but I thought it'd be interesting, and that kind of just opened that door, you know.
Why do you think there is so much infighting within Islam? I mean, I don't know a lot about it, but I hear about the Sunnis and the Shias and I guess warring tribes or things like that within the Islamic culture. Why is that?
It's about politics. I mean, religion is a great motivator. So anybody who wants to control people and motivate people to do or not do uses the best motivating factor they can find. And in the Middle East in particular, it's faith.
Yep.
And so people, they want control of an area, they want control of resources, they want control of people. So they manipulate Islam, and they get people to do things that are really inhumane.
I wanted to ask you, what is Sharia law to you? Because from what I see and understand, it's if you thieve, you lose your right hand. They'll amputate your hand if you're a thief. If there's adultery or homosexuality, it's death by stoning or whatever. If you're an apostate, or if you leave the religion, there's it's death to the person that does that. Is that Sharia law, or is that across the board within Islam? That's one thing I'm a little confused about.
Yeah, the thing with Sharia is, unfortunately, the way we hear about it is through generally the tabloid and sensationalist media.
Yep.
So, of course, they only portray one aspect of it or one portion of it. And not only do they portray that one, but they portray it in a way that is far from how it's practiced. So Sharia basically is a legal system, and it's not dissimilar to the common law. There's a lot, and in my view, it's about 97% of Sharia is completely compatible with Australian law. Okay. So things like the rule of law itself, due process, the adversarial system, plaintiff and defendant, or a claimant and defendant, all these things are straight from Sharia. Even the substantive law, like in contracts and torts, and all these huge areas, maritime law, all these are exactly the same.
Okay.
So where there's I suppose a difference is that Islam has, or Sharia has, corporal punishment. So it's physical punishment depending on what someone's done. But it's not like we imagine it to be. It's not barbaric, and it's not it's not extrajudicious, which means that there's a court held, and there has to be witnesses, and it has to be determined the person to a particular standard is guilty of a particular thing, and then the punishment has to be dished out by a judge, just like it happens in Australia if you're caught drink driving, or driving without a license, or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So there really isn't that much difference. And the other thing about Sharia, for non-Muslims like yourself in particular, is Sharia only applies to Muslims.
Okay.
It's got nothing to do with non-Muslims. Non-Muslims aren't. How can a person be forced to prescribe to a religious law that they don't follow that religion? They don't subscribe to that religious thought.
Yes.
So that's why there's nothing to worry about when it comes to Sharia for a non-Muslim.
Okay. What about in countries like Banda Aceh up in northern Indonesia and places like Saudi Arabia? You hear a lot about the beheadings there for, just from my perspective, which seems sort of like trivial crimes. I mean, like I've got some gay friends and they're gay and that's their business. And I think homosexuality, you get lashes, or adultery, there's the beheadings there. Is that a little extreme?
Again, it comes mainly down to politics. So people, the rulers, the people who are entitled, they want to show their constituency that they're doing something good. They want to show their constituency that you can trust me, you can follow me, you can believe in me. And so because the people there are Muslims, like I saw that one in Aceh, and I read the facts to it. These two homosexuals were in their house doing whatever they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And someone broke into their house and caught them in the act, so to speak. And Islamically, that's impermissible. What happens in people's houses is their business.
Even if they are gay?
Oh yeah, whatever happens in people's houses is their business. That's not an issue. And even in Australia, if someone's doing something that's illegal, so to speak, if there's no evidence or witnesses to substantiate that crime, it's like the tree falling in the woods with nobody around.
No one's around to hear it.
Right?
Yeah.
Is it a crime, right? So crimes have to be persecuted and prosecuted with evidence.
Okay.
And breaking into someone's house, whether they're drinking alcohol, which Muslims don't do, or two people that aren't married having a sexual relationship, that's their business. But when it becomes public, that's when the Sharia gets involved.
Okay. What about the people that renounce Islam? Like, for example, let's say you knew someone that was a Muslim and they said, I don't want to be a Muslim anymore, I want to be a Christian, for example. Like, is that punishable by death across the world in the Islamic community? So
in the Quran, it says specifically, we believe God says that there's no compulsion in religion. No one can be forced to believe. We have that. Our idea in the Islamic worldview of free speech is so that different thoughts, different philosophies can be discussed and thought about, and people can derive the truth from whatever's out there. That's the reason why we have free speech. So what happened was, after the time of the Prophet Muhammad, after he passed away, there was a lot of apostasy, which meant that people who were apostate at that time were actually treacherous. And so what they were doing was they were attacking the ruling party, so to speak, the ruling government at the time. So in that period, it was determined that whoever went against it, like whoever there's a particular term for it, but I forget what it's called. When someone's treacherous to the state, they're a traitor. So that type of thing was going on. So again, it goes back to the ruling class and the ruling governance, rather than individuals. And so it was determined then that that's what should happen. But in today's day and age, that's not applicable anymore. Firstly, we don't have any Sharia anywhere in the world. You mentioned Aceh, you mentioned Saudi Arabia. Well, Saudi Arabia is a kingdom, and Indonesia is a democracy, and they have some aspects of Sharia, but not a complete Sharia.
Okay, yeah. How do you think somewhere like, say, Banda Aceh is allowed to, I guess, enforce their Sharia law there when, I guess, essentially they're under the Indonesian government?
I don't know too much particularly about the Indonesian situation. Generally, when these things occur all throughout the world, in Africa and the Middle East, there's populism. Just like what's going on with Donald Trump and Pauline Hanson and all these people. When there's a critical mass of people moving in a particular direction, it's very difficult to stop them.
Yes.
It's very difficult.
Once they've got momentum.
And that's what's happening in New South Wales at the moment, and what's happening throughout Australia at the moment with this pretty much extreme right-wing movement. A minority controlling the majority, the very unsilent minority, and that's what happens in these countries. It's the same thing.
Okay. What do you think of someone like Pauline Hanson?
Like, she's got her good points and she's got her bad points. Obviously, she's a racist, and obviously she's an Islamophobe, and obviously she doesn't understand Islam. But what that's done, which she may or may not realise, is that's created, and she's divisive, which is not good for Australia, but that division has created a bunch of people that hate Muslims and are against Islam, but has also created many sympathisers, many people who are not Muslims, who have said, well, if that's what Pauline Hanson is saying about Islam, we don't believe that. So there must be something good about Muslims and Islam. And I know for myself, I can say without a doubt, all of my colleagues and all of my friends who were on the fence, so to speak, before she came about, are now totally in support of me as a Muslim and of Islam. And I see them on Facebook and other social media defending Muslims and defending Islam because they realise that what she's saying is not true. So there's always good and bad in everything.
Yeah, fair call. You know, I've read when I was reading up about the Quran. I've never read the Quran, but I was reading up about it, and where a man is allowed to hit his wife. You know, like obviously in modern day society, women having equal rights and opportunities. Is that still permissible that a man is allowed to hit his wife? And I think I read somewhere where he's allowed to hit her, but not cause injury or something like that. So, you know, you're allowed to slap her around a little bit or something, but, you know, not break her bones or something. I mean, is that allowed?
So the word in Arabic is daraba, which is, if it's translated into English, it can have the meaning of hit. But the word daraba is used more than 15 times with about 6 different connotations in the Quran.
Okay.
So one of them is yadribuna fil ard, which means they hit the ground. If you want to look at it literally, they hit the ground. What does that mean? But what it means is those people whose feet hit the ground when they're out trading.
Okay, like hit the ground running?
Their feet are moving, hitting the ground. So the Quran has some parts that are literal and some parts that are metaphorical. Okay. And the issue that you're talking about, which you started off with, that there's a lack of understanding, or what I would say misunderstanding about Islam, is because of the Arabic language. So most of the English translations we have about the Quran came in the colonialist period, where colonialists, English, Dutch, German colonialists, came to the Muslim lands, and then they looked and they said, oh, look, our culture is superior. Our way of life is superior. And these people, they're backwards, and they don't have the technology that we have. Yep. And so that's the eye in which they were looking at Islam and Muslims. And so when they translated the Quran, we're talking about 150-year-old translations, most of them.
Yeah.
They translated as they saw fit without looking at what the jurisprudence is. So when we look at the jurisprudence, Islamically speaking, the majority of scholars say it's impermissible for a man to hit his wife, or for anyone to hit anyone else for that matter.
Yes.
It's impermissible. And they say that the connotation of daraba, that word, which is, like I said, in the English sometimes translated as hit, is that either he should be upset or he should leave, one of the two. So of course, Islamically, it's impermissible for anyone. The Prophet, he's the perfect example, Muhammad, he never hit anyone in his whole life.
What do you think when, like I've heard somewhere people say that the Prophet was a pedophile and, you know, he was having, you know, sex with young kids or whatever. I mean, I've hear that now and again when I'm reading up on it, and they say it's such a hypocritical system because of, you know, apparently the Prophet, Muhammad was a pedophile. I mean, what do you think when you hear that? Is there any truth in that, or?
Yeah, the thing is that Islam's a 1,500-year-old tradition, and if we look back at our history, we'll find the kings of England, George and Henry and John, they were marrying 8-year-olds and 7-year-olds and 9-year-olds.
Back to the Roman Empire.
You know, that was the norm. So here we are living in 2000 and whatever it was when that statement was made, and we're making an accusation about a man who lived 1,500 years ago, and from the time he lived, which is about 650 AD, up until 10 years ago, up until September 11, no one of the historians, no one of the biographers, no one of any other religion had ever made that accusation and that claim that the Prophet Muhammad was a pedophile. But now it suits us. It suits the kind of I suppose the global hegemony and dominance of one culture to try and dispel and belittle and, in a sense, humiliate another culture, because we're the dominant, the Western culture is the dominant, English culture is the dominant, white culture is the dominant. And so we want to see ourselves as superior, because we are militarily, industrially, and even philosophically in terms of our media machines throughout the world. Even agriculturally, we're superior.
Okay.
So there's a small minority of us controlling the whole world. And so we want, again, just like any other political situation, we want people to believe in our political strength. And so, because Islam has become so prominent since September 11, 2001, we want to dispel that in any particular way we can.
Gotcha. Yep. What you mentioned 9/11 earlier. How did, from your, obviously you've got a lot of people connections within the Islamic community. What do you guys think of 9/11? You hear the conspiracy theories that the American government was behind it. You hear that it was a bunch of cave dwellers from Afghanistan, with Osama bin Laden sort of, pushing those guys to create those acts. What does the Islamic community think of 9/11?
There's a lot of differing opinion within the Islamic community. Of course, there are the doubters and the conspiracy theorists that are Muslim and non-Muslim. I mean, for me personally, it doesn't make much sense. Like, if that's the theory that some guys from Afghanistan, which at the time, and it still may be, the world's poorest country. Okay, let's just go with the theory that we're being told. Muslims want to rule the world, okay?
Yeah.
Isn't that what we're being told?
Yeah,
we want to take over the West and take over the East and take over the North and the South. All right, so here we are, these Muslims in Afghanistan, as you said, cave dwellers. They want to take over the world. So to take over the world, you've got to have a bit of brains. You can't be that stupid. Or otherwise, they're just a bunch of idiots and they're crazy and don't worry about them. Can't have it both ways.
Yeah.
But let's go with the theory that, yep, these guys are going to take over the world and we should be worried about them. Here they are living in caves, the world's poorest country, attacking the world's richest, most economically advanced, most militarily advanced country, probably in the history of humanity. What are we going to expect is going to happen? They're going to attack you back. Yeah. So what kind of world dominance? What doesn't make sense?
What to you is jihad? I know of it as when I hear the word jihad, I hear it quite often as translated as to a holy war. What's your interpretation of jihad? Firstly,
there's no such thing as a holy war in Islam. That word, it's a Christian word, taken from the Christian faith and implanted into Islam. It's jihad, the Arabic word, means to make effort or to strive. So basically, jihad means, if you want to break it down in the most Aussie way, do your best.
Okay.
Do your best. So that means if you're driving, do your best not to speed. Do your best not to break the law. If you're studying, do your best to get good marks. If you're surfing, do your best not to cut anyone off or snake anyone or, right? That's what it means. And that's, if we as Australians and we as Muslims live to that standard, Muslim Australians I mean, that means paying your taxes. That means being honest in all your dealings with people. That means keeping your appointments. So it means giving your best in all circumstances and situations.
Okay, why do you think it got misconstrued or translated incorrectly as a holy war?
There is a connotation that when a person is disenfranchised to an extent or being attacked and they're defending themselves, that, again, to do your best in that situation may be to take up physical arms and maybe to enter into combat. So there is a connotation of that, and it's just been, interpolated and extrapolated and good for selling papers, good for clickbait,
good for Murdoch.
Yeah. It's good for those people.
What would I, to the Islamic community, if I was a Christian or a Buddhist or a Catholic or anything like, or an atheist or whatever, am I an infidel? Like, what is an infidel? I sometimes hear that someone who isn't a Muslim, you're not part of us, you're over there, you're an infidel. So I get confused with that.
See, we don't like to use that term. We don't like to name people and label people. All human beings are human beings, and as Muslims, we're the creations of God. We believe that that's our belief. We believe that God created us as Muslims, and we believe God created everybody else, irrespective of what their faith or non-faith might be. So the injunction for us in our faith is to love everybody. And as soon as you start labeling people, you can't love that person anymore. And if you don't know who that person is, and there's a saying, classic saying, that you can love anyone once you know their story. So our faith is a faith of acceptance. And our faith is a faith not of tolerance. Tolerance is just to say, yeah, okay, you're cool, be who you are. But it's not that. Our faith is a faith of acceptance. So we don't like to label people about that. We leave that to God. And actually, it's impermissible for us in our faith to call somebody, the word in Arabic is kafir, someone who is a disbeliever and will never believe in God. That's not up to us. That's up to God.
So that's impermissible in the Quran?
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
Yes.
I didn't know that. I want to ask you about a word. Correct me if I've pronounced this incorrectly. Explain taqiyya to me, which I believe is permissible lying.
Right. So the taqiyya is, in the Sunni tradition, is reserved for only when a person's life is threatened. So the example is this. Back in the day, two people were traveling from one area. Two Muslims were traveling from one area to another. So what happened was they got captured by a band of bandits,
right,
who were against Islam. They were against Muslims. And so they said to them, renounce your faith in God. And so one of them said, no, I believe in God. I'm not going to renounce my faith. They killed him. So the second one they said to him, renounce your faith, or we're going to do what we did to your friend to you. And then he's like, oh, okay, look, I renounce. But in his heart, he didn't. So when he came to the Prophet, he said to the Prophet, look, I did this. I feel really bad about it. Is it okay? That's taqiyya.
Okay. Can it be stretched beyond that?
Only when someone's life's in danger. That's the injunction. So all these things you hear in the press that it's taqiyya, they're people who, no matter what you tell them about Islam, no matter what you tell them about Muslims, they're never going to believe. So they throw that word out all the time to say, can't believe these guys, can't believe these guys. Well, who can you believe then about Islam? Well, right-wingers, people who've got no experience, people with no authority, people with no knowledge about Islam, people that, you heard something somewhere without any background to it, without any evidence to suggest that what you're saying is right. So you believe that because it suits your own ideology or your own political agenda. And talk to the people who are experts, and then you'll get the reality of it. So it just gets thrown around,
Yeah, because I was curious about that, because I do hear that bandied around a lot. That I remember hearing a story once where they said it was like, you have a neighbour, or a Muslim guy would have a neighbour, and he would say, I'm not Muslim, and the Islamic guy would say, oh, that's totally cool, and something like that, but he wouldn't be cool with it, and he was using taqiyya or whatever it is. So
why? I mean, how does it even apply in that situation? All it is convenient for people who never want to accept anything about Islam. They're totally, discriminatory towards Islam and towards Muslims, and whatever you say, they won't accept anything of that. Whatever's in their heads, whatever they learnt or heard from any unreliable source, that's my experience with people who throw that around.
Yeah, okay. What do you guys think of ISIS? Do you think ISIS has really sort of muddied or dirtied the name of Islam around the world? Because obviously a lot of Western people, when they think of ISIS straight away, they think of Muslims, or if they think of the Islamic culture, they think of ISIS. I mean, what's the Islamic community's opinion of ISIS?
Yeah, they're deviants. No one in them, very, very, I've never met anyone, put it that way, in the Islamic community that has any respect or any sympathy for them. And you can't, they take the words of God, Allah, in our tradition, and the words of the Quran, and the words of the prophetic tradition, and twist it around to their own vile and evil, desires. What is it that they were missing before? They could practice their faith.
Yeah.
They could do anything they wanted to do in their own faith. But now, what is it? It's a land grab. Same thing. It's these people who, politically speaking, or they're motivated by money or resources. That's the only thing that I can put it down to. And, they're doing a great disservice to Muslims and Islam.
What does, for example, obviously we see on the news quite often here that, this young kid that shot that Curtis Chang guy or whatever. You know, the police doing raids on houses in southwestern Sydney, and you know, they caught 3 young men that had attended a mosque and things like that previously. Are the elders within the Islamic community keeping an eye out on, I guess, these bad eggs in the batch? Are they trying to root them out and remove them because they could potentially be giving you guys
Let me give you a practical, it's not even about the bad name. Let me give you a practical example. If something happens to do with Muslims in Australia, do you think I'll be able to walk around like this safely? Think my wife will be able to walk around with her hijab on, or my sister, or my mother, or my auntie? We have a lot more to lose with regards to Islamic terrorism than anybody else. And Muslims have been the #1 victims of ISIS. And not only Muslims, but Muslim shrines, Muslim museums, Muslim light. They burn books. ISIS would consider me an apostate.
Wow.
Of course. Because I don't follow their strand. They're the ideology that you're either with us or you're against us. And we all understand what that ideology is. It's about power. It's about control.
Do you think
it's
there's
about
a lot
hegemony.
of ego in there?
There has to be.
Yeah.
The reports that I heard from some of the things I read from independent people, that these guys are on drugs, they drink alcohol, they don't pray. That's what I heard. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
They're the reports that I hear from non-mainstream, of course, sources, because that's no good for the mainstream media to say that they're not. And even these guys that are doing these things, like the guy that shot up the gay nightclub in Miami, most of these people have already been reported to the authorities by Muslims. The guy in France, he's been reported. All these guys have been reported. What's his name? The guy, the Lint Cafe had been reported like 15 different times by 15 different. Right. So the issue there is that, if you ask me, that this whole anti-terrorism, legislation and law enforcement has been a monumental failure. If you look at the amount in Australia, the amount of money the government has spent, and I don't know what it is, but I'd hazard a guess that it'd be around $1 billion at least, or if not more.
At least.
Right? It's been a complete monumental failure. Monumental failure. There's been very, very little interaction between the government and the Muslim community. I used to work in that space, the CVE, the countering violent extremism. Government doesn't listen to us. If I'm telling you these people have been reported, these people that are on the news doing these things have been reported to the authorities time and time and time again. What else do you want us to do? Me as a Muslim, I take no responsibility for these people. Zero responsibility, because it's not my responsibility to enforce the law. I don't have any jails, I don't have a police force, I don't have any legislation, neither does any Muslim in Australia, that allows us to do these things.
Would you guys like the power to be able to do that, even within your own community?
I don't think we need the power. I just think we need the government to trust us. Government doesn't trust us. Government thinks that look, I'm sort of talking from personal experience. The bureaucracy, that lower level is fine. The people on the coalface, they work with us. But when it comes to votes, can you imagine a politician doing something to work with the Muslim community and then how their votes are going to be? Especially in the current climate we're in.
Yes.
So it's not going to happen, not in the short. And I've spoken with prime ministers and premiers and ministers at all levels. It's not going to happen. So that's why I take no responsibility. And we've approached the government time and time and time and time again without anything happening. I'll give you a specific example. John Howard and his National Action Plan, $42 million allocated to the Muslim community to integrate Muslims into the greater Australian way of life. $256,000 was given to one man to do a research about the extremists, so-called extremists in Sydney. $256,000, and the rest just went back into government departments. As one another specific example, they're looking to give employment to people in southwestern Sydney. They give the funding to a Queensland employment agency, $4.1 million.
Yeah, right. So it doesn't seem like it's really going to the right places.
Like I said, a total failure.
With you and your own experience and that of your friends and family, what, I guess, bigotry and racism have you personally encountered as a kid, teenager, adult, as a sheikh?
How about death threats? Yeah, I get death threats all the time. On my Facebook, people ring saying we're going to destroy all Muslims, we're going to kill you, going to kill your family. Every time I'm in the media, people, commenting on, you have a look on the SBS one, see what they write. Well, regular. It's my friends, death threats as well. Anyone who's a bit prominent talking about Islam and giving the true face of Islam is a threat. And
I might get one now.
Mate, I don't know.
Stuff them. I've got a question. I've got a good friend of mine, Grant Varker. He wanted me to ask you this question. It's 2017, and Islam is the youngest of all three monotheistic religions. Judaism is 5,000 years old, Christianity 2,000 years old, and Islam the youngest at around 1,500 years old. Is Islam in this day and age open to reformation, and would getting rid of jihad help?
So in regards to Islam and Sharia, there's two aspects to it. There's what's in the Quran, the word of God, and what's in the prophetic tradition. So those don't change. That's like the constitution, you might say. Constitution's the constitution, and that's it. I mean, we can change our constitution with a referendum, 75%, all these things, but Islamically we don't change those things. Then there's a thing called Jihad, which comes from the word jihad, right? It has nothing to do with anything physical. It's about the scholars and their legal reasoning and all the different types. There's, probably about 20 different types of 25 different types of legal reasoning. So that's the interpretation. And the three main things the scholars look at in interpretation is the time, the place, and the circumstances, the status quo. And that's how they have to derive their legal rulings. So although the Quran doesn't change, the jurisprudence, in other words, the law, is super dynamic and fluid. Now, I don't like the word reform, because reform, again, it's a negative connotation. There's something wrong with Islam. There's nothing wrong with Islam. The issue is that the scholars haven't made those juristic determinations about applying Islam in the current time and place. And the reason that it's coming to light is because we were cruising around. 10 September 2011, I was dressed like this walking the city. I had no problems. I was fine. No one was asking me, does Islam need reform? No one was asking me, are you guys barbaric? Do you chop off hands? No one was asking me anything. They're like, that guy's a bit weird looking. That's as much, people wouldn't give me a second look. But the next day, people that I knew, people that I'd had lunch with, cafes that I'd spent every single day in because I was working in the city, there were people just freaking out. As I walked by, like everyone in the cafe would be like,
he's after us.
What's going on?
Yeah.
Right? So the issue is that it's the duty, God-given duty of the scholars to bring Islam into whatever time, place, and circumstance it's in. So that's an ongoing process. But how would we know that if we're listening to the media? Sorry, mate. I mean, I don't want to be harsh, but the reality is a reality. How would I know that? How would I know anything about the Australian law by listening to them? Remember when Mabo came out?
Yes.
What happened? Telegraph, front page, Aboriginal people on top of the Opera House. Come on, what are you on about? And it's the same thing for Muslims, but the difference is Islam is so foreign for us. And that's a mistake for Australia. Considering Indonesia is one of our closest neighbours, and we've got, 500 million Muslims up the road, I think that they should be teaching like Bahasa, not Arabic, Bahasa. Yeah. I should be able to speak Bahasa if I'm an Aussie.
Yeah.
Because, how many of us go to Bali and other places for holidays?
Very true.
So we're the ones who are behind, no offence. No offence. And Islam also is behind because the scholars haven't brought it in. And I would say as an Australian Muslim that we need our own Australian strain of Islam. And jihad's got nothing to do with it. Jihad has got nothing to do with it. I got gay friends, I got white friends, I got African friends, I got Jewish friends, I got all my faith doesn't stop me from having all that.
Could a gay person become a Muslim, or is that
sure.
forbidden? I mean, because
sure.
I sometimes think it's like if I hear of a gay Christian, I kind of think, isn't that a bit odd? Because you hear about Christianity being so against homosexuals. Could a gay couple, whether they were a lesbian or homosexual, could they become Muslims? Would that be accepted?
Anyone can become Muslim. One time I was at a forum and there was a Jewish rabbi and a Christian priest and myself, and the students asked, how do you guys become Jewish, Christian or Muslim? And there's a long process to become a Jew. It's like 2 years, and it was a Catholic priest, so I don't know about others, but he's saying it's like a 6-month thing to become a priest, a Catholic. For us, it's instantaneous. So whoever believes in God, whoever believes in the Prophet, they're a Muslim. That's it, full stop.
Yeah.
Their actions are something different. But in terms of we're not the door to open to people to get to God, or the door to close for people to get to God. That's God. He does what he wants. Yes. God does what God wants to do. We got to just you know, if we can be a conduit to help people, that's great, irrespective of their persuasions, irrespective of their sins, irrespective of, it's about their belief.
Now, I want to talk to you about surfing. So you're known as the surfing Sheikh. How did you get the name? Who gave you that?
Someone in the media, you know, they love it. You know, it's
Yeah.
sensationalism. How can a guy that's dressed like me, looks like me, is a Middle Eastern Muslim, like surfing? So it just kind of stuck.
The media, hey?
Yeah, you got to blame them for just about everything, don't you?
How did you discover surfing?
When I was about 11 or 12, we had a family friend of ours, and she was an Australian lady. She was an extraordinary person. Philippa Fingleton was her name. And her husband was an opening batsman with Donald Bradman, Jack Fingleton.
Yeah, right.
Right? And she became our grandma. That's how Australia works. The reason why I'm so Aussie is because of her and her family. So on Christmas, she'd have a separate day for us. We'd come there, we'd have Christmas dinner with her.
Yeah.
She'd come and teach my mum English. She'd take us to the zoo. She'd take us to, because my mum didn't speak English. She didn't know how to get around. I'm talking 80s, you know, like early 80s. And she'd come to our house and she'd bring us presents and we'd bring her presents. So she inculcated us into the Australian culture. And that's what, if you want Muslims to be accepted, accept them. And so one day she had a holiday house at Copacabana on the Central Coast, and her son-in-law was there and he had a surfboard. And he's like, do you want to have a go? I'm like, yeah, let's have a go. And I got up first time.
Wow.
And just got hooked.
Pretty cool. One thing I've noticed that you're using surfing as, and from what I understand, you're using surfing as a medium or a tool to introduce Muslim men into an Australian way of culture, and also as a way to steer them away from radical Islam. Is that correct?
Well, like I said, I don't know anyone, don't have any of my Muslim friends, and I asked all the young people, 18-year-old people, all these, I said, has anyone ever approached you online or sent you anything to do that? And they all said no, because we're talking about some little black hole somewhere in the internet where you've got to know where you are, you've got to know to get there. It's not open, it's illegal.
Yes.
It's illegal. And the amount of surveillance on, you know, the buzzwords that are out there is insane. So it's not like people perceive it to be. It's extremely difficult. I'm yet to meet anyone that's been approached by anyone who's saying that, you know, we want to join ISIS or fight whatever. It doesn't exist, not in my experience anyway. But surfing for me, it's like, and everyone says it's quintessentially Aussie and all that, yeah, whatever it is. But for me, you know, being close to the ocean's the biggest living thing in the world. You know, there's more ocean than there is land. And I think we lose our perspective as you know, pteropods.
Yeah,
you know,
being on the land.
Right. We lose our perspective, but being in the ocean brings back perspective. And even from my Islamic point of view, in the Quran it says we created all things from water. And the pH level of ocean water is the same as the pH level of blood. So obviously we came from the ocean somehow, you know, in some form. And for me, it's a deeply spiritual, you know, event being in the water. That's why I don't like having short surf sessions, because I like to get into it. No offense, fellas. You know, I like to be there and feel it and experience it and be scared and be intimidated and be out of my league, because it puts me back in my place.
Yeah.
It allows me to know that, you think you're something, but you're not. You're just a little speck floating around on a speck, floating around in space, and anything could happen tomorrow or in any instant to finish all that. So don't get too comfortable in who you are and what you're doing and what you think you're doing.
Yeah.
So for me personally, that's what surfing is to me. And catching a wave and getting barreled is pretty sweet too.
Pretty cool. How was it accepted within the Muslim community when you decided to surf and to introduce other people within the community to it?
Totally accepted. Muslims love the beach. I mean, most Muslims I know, every time I meet someone, oh, you're the surfing sheikh, take us out for a surf.
Yeah, cool.
Take us out for a surf. I'm like, yeah, in summer, you haven't got a wetsuit, it's too cold in winter. So the Muslims love the beach. It'd be great if there's a beach in Bankstown, but it doesn't work that way.
Maybe a wave pool one day.
That'd be awesome.
That'd be pretty cool.
That'd be awesome.
Have a lot of the guys that you've taught, these young Islamic men that you've introduced to surfing, do many of them carry on with it and continue to surf?
Yeah, there's 6 of them that I know. They've got their own surfboards, their own wetsuits, ready to roll.
Cool. And have you caught much shit off people in the water? Like you're out there with a bunch of guys and some Aussies in the surf?
Only because we're kooks. If we weren't kooks, it wouldn't be too much of an issue.
Yeah.
But I think the whole issue with Aussies are pretty down to earth, right? And it's a really thin layer of fear. Like you said, 90% of your friends were saying that. But where to me or any other Muslim meet them, that just kind of goes away straight away. Aussies don't have this entrenched towards Islam. I mean, unfortunately with the Islamophobia report that came out earlier this week, you know, there's been like 240 attacks in the last 2 years, and most of them on women, and most bystanders didn't do anything. So unfortunately, if we don't make a change sometime soon, it will become entrenched.
Yeah.
It will become entrenched. So most Aussies are pretty cool, and you know how surfers are. They accept anyone. Anyone is a surfer. If you can catch a wave, you know the etiquette, you're all right pretty much.
Well, I know growing up in Manly and surfing there, I mean, I had friends that were Tongans, friends that were Greek, Italians, Indians, you know, Asians, and you know, Anglos, and everyone was cool as long as you were a decent guy. And,
that's it.
And you had a go. Mate, I'm one of the people that's not intimidated by you guys. I think you're a pretty cool guy. I was very happy to share the water with you today and share a wave or two.
Me too.
It's been an absolute pleasure having you come out here and have a chat with us. And I'm very grateful for that. And I guess if there's a message to take back to, you know, your community, is not everyone is like the media portrays.
True.
And Haisam Farache, thank you very much
Pleasure.
for surfing Sheikh.
Look, I think it's also important, if people share those sentiments and have the sentiments you have, you've got to let that get out there. Whether it's on your Facebook, whether you see a Muslim somewhere, particularly a sister that wears hijab, talk to her. Don't be afraid. Hello, look, I'm interested, you know. As long as you're polite and you're interested and you're generally inquisitive, Muslims love that.
Yeah.
And that's gonna create that confidence.
Yeah.
So all the negativity that's out there in the media and wherever else, if one person takes that step to know somebody, to make that bridge, to connect then two people, two Aussies sitting in the train going to wherever, or, you know, hanging at the beach or at the park or whatever it is, that makes all the difference. And that message of positivity will get spread out through the Muslim community, because people will constantly be saying, well, I met this person approached me, this person spoke to me, just as Muslims have to get out there as well.
Yeah.
So if we want to, you know, the Gandhi saying, if you want, be the change you want to see, we have to be out there, and we have to be positive, and we have to break that little glass barrier. You know what I mean? That little veil between us and somebody else. Say, look, no, I'm going to do it. I'm going to talk to someone who I think is possibly a Muslim, or looks like a Muslim, or particularly a lady wearing hijab. Do it.
Like you said to me down at the water's edge, and it's a sentiment I echo a lot, there's good and bad people, and I'm just interested in having conversations and getting to know and get educated by good people. And that's why I wanted to meet up with you after seeing that little article on you surfing, the Surfing Sheikh. I was like, man, this is interesting. That's different. And I thought, I want to meet this guy. And from the few hours I've spent with you now, you're a good dude. You're a good guy.
Thanks.
And I really like that. And I think more communities, not just the Muslim community, but I think more communities as a whole need people that are leading by example, like what you're doing. And in a sense, I hope to mirror that by saying, hey, you don't go and judge these people until you get to know them.
Exactly.
And I've been more screwed over by Anglo-Aussies than I ever have by Aboriginals or Asians or Muslims or Wogs or whatever. And, you know, at the end of the day, life is about two types of people, good people and bad people. And I think, like you've said a few times, I think the media likes to tarnish the Islamic community with that evil brush. And I think for me, it's an ongoing process about getting educated about. I've spent a lot of time in Indonesia, which is the largest Islamic country or nation in the world. I've never had any dramas there. Yeah, so that's why I think before you judge, you should get educated about something. Definitely. But mate, thank you so much.
No,
I thoroughly appreciate it. You're a legend.
Pleasure.
Good man.
Thanks, man.